Perfect. There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Danny Clough. I am the Channel Marketing Coordinator on the QGive team. Today, I'm joined by Brendan Smith from QGive's Business Development team, and of course, our speakers, Michelle Bibbs and Jaron Bernstein, who will be sharing the insights into the recently released 2023 Giving Report from Giving USA. A few house notes, but before we begin today, we are recording the webinar, and so all registrants are going to be receiving an email tomorrow afternoon with a link to the session, as well as some additional resources. Please feel free to use the chat to talk with Brendan, Michelle, Jaron, and I, as well as your peers who are on the webinar today. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear them. You can add those into the Q&A area of Zoom, and we'll go through those at the end of the webinar. If you have trouble with the Q&A area, no worries. You can add those into the chat, and we'll keep track of those so we can make sure Michelle and Jaron get to them. Before we get started, for those of you who may be unfamiliar with QGive, we are an online fundraising platform. We have solutions for all sizes of nonprofits, including year-round fundraising tools, text giving, peer-to-peer fundraising, and auction tools. If any of those options sound like they could be beneficial to you and your organization, please reach out. We'd love to chat with you. And of course, we're also excited to refer you to our nonprofit network. One of those partners, of course, being Alford Group, who's here with us today. Alford Group is a national full-service consultancy that has served more than 3,000 nonprofits nationwide, helping them to accelerate their impact and advance social change. We're so excited to have them here with us today. And of course, as I mentioned earlier today, joining us, we have Michelle Bibbs and Jaron Bernstein. I cannot do their background justice, so I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So if you're a note taker like I am, pens, paper, get them out because they're about to unload a lot of information on all of us.
Danny, thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here with you and QGive and everyone who has joined us today. My name is Michelle Bibbs. I'm a senior consultant with Alford Group. I am coming to you today from Chicago, Illinois. I am sitting in a room with a white blinds covered windows in the back and a brick covered wall on one side. I'm wearing a teal top and glasses with a red rim. Delighted to be with you today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jaron Bernstein. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a consultant with Alford Group. Coming to you in front of my blurred out background home office here in Seattle, Washington. I am a light-skinned Ashkenazi Jewish man with a beard and short, light reddish brown hair and green eyes. I'm wearing a blue shirt, button-up shirt, and a navy blue blazer. And we are so thrilled to be here with you today on behalf of Alford Group. For those of you who may not be as familiar with us, thank you, Danny, for that introduction. We are a 44-year-old consultancy, full-service consultancy serving the nonprofit community with 6 flagship services, including fundraising, strategic and organizational planning, governance, interim staffing, data management and assessment, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are a proud partner of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, a certified women-owned business enterprise, and a member of the Giving Institute, which, as we know or may not know, makes the Giving USA report possible, which we are here to talk about today.
We are excited to share with you highlights from the Giving USA 2023 annual report on philanthropy. Today, we will give an overview of Giving USA and how the report is compiled, followed by important takeaways from this year's snapshot. This report reflects total philanthropic giving in 2022 and provides an overview of the sources of giving and recipients by sectors. Email us at info@alford.com to request a 30% discount on your order of Giving USA 2023 report materials. So in the next 45 minutes, we will offer background on Giving USA, share findings on contributions in 2022, and changes in giving over the past 2 years. Elevate trends in giving by source and by recipient sector.
So what is Giving USA? For those of you who are not aware, Giving USA is the oldest and most comprehensive report on charitable giving in the United States. It's published by the Giving USA Foundation, which is a part of the Giving Institute, formerly known as the American Association of Fundraising Council. The Giving Institute is an association comprised of national firms such as Alford Group, and our consultancy has been a member of the Institute, as well as a significant donor to the research that is reflected in this report for over 30 years. We're also thrilled to share that our very own president and CEO, Brenda Asari, has assumed the role of board chair of the Giving Institute as of last week. So we're all very proud of her and very excited to share that. The report itself is researched and written by the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy and made possible by contributions from the Giving Institute member firms, foundations, and other donors. It's a really big data project. It represents information from 128 million households, 1.48 million nonprofits, 90,000 foundations, and businesses of all sizes.
So let's begin with the takeaways. We saw record generosity in 2020 and 2021, and following those years, giving overall was down in 2022. Foundation giving made up a larger percentage of overall giving. And our third takeaway is that proven principles for fundraising of focused strategies to cultivate and build donor relationships remain essential.
So let's dive into those takeaways in a little more detail. The first being that overall giving is down in 2022, but that's not the whole picture. Before we get into a little bit more detail on this takeaway, we just like to start off with a brief poll question. And we're curious to know from those who are in attendance, how was your fundraising for your organization in 2022? Did your organization raise more money in 2022 than in 2021? Did it raise less money in 2022 than in 2021? Or did you raise about the same amount in both years? I'll give you a moment to answer that question, recognizing that some of you may be on fiscal years that don't align with the calendar year. Ask that you make your best estimation. Just want to get a sense of how your experience was before we jump into the rest of the report. And I'm not able to see the answers that are coming in. So I don't know
Annie,
if
are
we
you
need
able to see those?
close that.
Yes, can you see it now?
No,
No, we
unfortunately,
still
I
see
can't.
the slide.
Interesting. My apologies. Let me.
Annie, are you able to share the results?
Yes, let me do that. We went, of course, it's not working now that we went through it in preparation before the webinar started.
Right.
So we have 34% saying my organization raised more money than in 2021. 36% saying my organization raised less money than 2021, and 30% saying we raised about the same in 2022 as we did in 2021.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Danny. And thank you all for answering. It's really interesting to see that's a pretty even split. And so
What?
when we talk about the takeaway being that giving was down, it's interesting to note that about 2/3 of you had a different experience than that. So you just want to keep that in mind as we're giving you these takeaways. You know, that the overall trend or the overall takeaway might not be applicable to your individual experience. So with that said, let's talk a little bit in more detail. So as we said, after soaring past $500 billion to $516.65 billion in 2021, giving in 2022 totaled $499.33 billion. This is a 3.4% decline year over year in current dollars since 2021. In inflation adjusted terms, total giving changed by 10.5% in 2022. So you'll see us talking about both current dollars and inflation adjusted dollars throughout our presentation. We will be focusing on inflation adjusted terms because it gives a better sense, a more accurate depiction of the year over year change based on the value of the dollar. This chart shows the trend in total giving since 1982. And again, we reached $499.3 billion in 2022, which is inflation adjusted decline of $58.58 billion in between 2021 and 2022. Note that this decline, as Michelle said, comes on the heels of two of the most generous years ever. 2021 having surpassed $500 billion for the first time ever, as folks responded likely to the needs related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Since 1982, when adjusted for inflation, total charitable giving has declined 9 times. And as you'll see on this next slide, inflation adjusted declines in total giving often have come during times of economic uncertainty. This is the same information represented in a slightly different way. The green bars represent years of economic recession, and you can see how total giving tends to decline or remain flat in those time periods, with the notable exception being the COVID-related recession in 2020. When considering the decline in total giving in 2022, it's important to remember that 1 year's worth of data is not enough to be considered a trend. In fact, if you look farther back, giving is trending upwards. Since 1982, total giving in inflation adjusted dollars has grown at an average annual rate of 2.6%, or $7.84 billion in inflation adjusted terms. And over the most recent decade, from 2013 to 2022, total inflation adjusted giving grew by 20.2%, which is nearly double the growth of the previous 10 years. So what are some reasons that could explain why total giving was down in 2022? There are a number of overall economic factors that influence how much donors give, and several key ones were in play in 2022. The first being disposable personal income, or how much spendable income a household has available after taxes have been paid. This is a key determinant of how much households then give. Disposable personal income declined 0.1% in 2022, but when adjusted for inflation, that represents a 7.5% decline. Here we see charitable giving from individuals as a percentage of their disposable personal income since 1982. In 2022, this figure was 1.7%, which is a decline compared to the previous 3 years, slightly, when individual giving represented 1.8% of disposable personal income. At 1.7%, 2022's individual giving as a percentage of disposable personal income is the lowest level in the past 40 years, having also dropped to this level in 1995 previously. It reached its highest level in 2005, at 2.4%. But as you can see, throughout this whole period, it has always hovered around 2% of disposable personal income. So not only did disposable personal income decline significantly when adjusted for inflation, the percentage of that income that individuals then donated also declined slightly. A second factor that maybe contributed to this decline was the perception of overall health of the economy. Now, total giving has historically tracked with the growth and decline of the stock market, or using the S&P 500 as sort of an example of that. The S&P 500 declined by 25.4% in 2022 when adjusted for inflation. Similarly, giving as a percentage of GDP was down to 2%. That's down from 2.3% in 2020, which was another 40-year high. So this chart shows the inflation-adjusted value of the S&P 500 plotted along with total giving in inflation-adjusted dollars. Because stock market values are an indicator of financial and economic security, households and corporations are likely to give more when the stock market is up. This is somewhat intuitive. The S&P 500, though, generally sees more dramatic changes from year to year than total giving, both in the direction of the change and the robustness of that change, whether it's a growth or decline. Total giving does mirror the S&P 500, but it might lag behind it slightly. So again, the S&P 500 declined 25.4% in inflation-adjusted dollars between 2021 and 2022. This is compared with a decline of 10.5% of total giving in inflation-adjusted dollars. Here we see the trend of giving as a percentage of GDP since 1982. GDP, or gross domestic product, is defined as the market value of all goods and services produced within a country's borders within a specific period of time. And it's one of the most important factors considered when measuring the status of a nation's economy. In 2022, percentage of giving as a percentage of total GDP was 2%. As I mentioned before, it reached 2.3% in 2022, which was a 40-year high. And throughout most of the 1980s and 90s, it was actually below 2%, rose to 2% and above through most of the 2000s, and then had a slight drop in the years of 2009 to 2011 during the Great Recession to 1.9%. But since 2012, total giving as a percentage of GDP has been at least 2%. Finally, the third factor, as we likely all know, was that inflation reached an all-time high of 8% in 2022. Now, looking forward, we do see that inflation is coming down over the first 6 months of 2023, and US households are starting to see some relief. The last I checked, June 2023, inflation was around 3%, which is closer to the target. So hopefully this will be not the case when we deliver this information to you all next year. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to talk about our second key takeaway.
Thanks, Jaron. And now that Jaron has painted a picture of the broad economic factors that contribute to the decline in giving, we'll take a closer look at the decline in terms of sources and in terms of recipients. And so our second takeaway focuses on giving by foundations that grew as a share of total giving. And this demonstrates the increasing prominence of foundation-directed giving. Giving by foundations, which includes grants made by independent, community, and operating foundations, amounted to 21% of all gifts made in 2022. And this is an increase of 2.5% from 19% in 2021. Giving by bequest accounted for 9% of all gifts made in 2022. Direct giving by individuals comprised 64% of total giving in 2022, a decline of 13.4% when adjusted for inflation. And lastly, giving by corporations comprised 6% of total giving in 2022 and performed more strongly amid the unusual economic conditions that Jaron was describing earlier. Put together, we see that all forms of individual giving include 64% in direct individual giving, 9% from bequests, and about half of foundation giving comes from family or individual foundations. Altogether totals 83.5% or almost 84% of all giving as coming from individuals. Estimated charitable giving by individuals and households was $319.04 billion in 2022. Adjusted for inflation, this is a decline of 13.4%. Grant making, when adjusted for inflation, declined by 5% in 2022. Yet, even though grant making by independent community and operating foundations was down, it was a bigger piece of the giving pie in 2022. Charitable giving by bequest reached $45.6 billion, and when adjusted for inflation, declined by 5.3% in 2022. And charitable giving by corporations totaled $29.48 billion. When adjusted for inflation, that source declined by 4.2% in 2022. Estimated charitable giving by individuals and households fell from a record high in 2021 to $319.4 billion in 2022. The total amount estimated for giving by individuals in 2022 includes itemized and non-itemized charitable contributions, including gifts of cash, securities, and property. We often hear a lot about very large gifts by some of the wealthiest Americans. Such gifts reached a total of nearly $13.96 billion in 2022. Mega gifts are defined as 500 million or more, which is up from 450 million in 2021. So we have another poll for you. What percentage of individual giving do you think is comprised of mega gifts? 0 to 9%, 9 to 19%, 20 to 49%, or 50 to 70%? And Danny, again, if you can share the results that you see as they are coming in.
Absolutely. I'm watching the number keep climbing. So I was going to give people
Okay,
just another,
it'll be fun
another
to see
second.
what people think.
Okay, it looks like we're slowing down. No.
Okay.
Got the majority there. Can you see the results now?
We can.
Yes.
Perfect.
So it looks like we've got, I'm reading this right, 51% believe it's between 0 and 9%. 25% think it's between 10 and 19%. Another 14%, it looks like, believe it's between 20 and to just under half, and then the last 10% believe it's 50 to 70%. Well, the answer is 5%. Mega gifts in 2022 represent the same percentage of individual giving as they did in 2021. So we may think about ways to engage mega donors, but the fact remains that while they are transformational, especially for the recipient institutions, these gifts represent a very small percentage of total giving. Here we see grant making by independent, community, and operating foundations when adjusted for inflation declined by 5% in 2022. Again, it's because overall giving was down, is that foundation giving represents a larger share. And again, we're looking at a 40-year snapshot, which continues to show that upward trend. Charitable giving by bequest declined by 5.3% in 2022. The total amount for giving by bequest includes an estimated amount for charitable bequests from estates with assets of 10 million and above, estates with assets between 1 and 10 million, and estates with assets below 1 million. For 2022, estimated giving from estates of 10 million and more amounted to 24.27 billion. Giving from estates between 1 and 10 million amounted to 9.47 billion. An estimated bequest giving from estates with assets below $1 million amounted to 11.86 billion. So here we see a large percentage of charitable bequest giving came from smaller estates, more than from the 1 to 10 million estates in 2022. This underscores the importance of having a planned giving program. And charitable giving by corporations, when adjusted for inflation, declined by 4.2% in 2022. Corporate giving includes cash and in-kind contributions made through corporate giving programs, as well as grants and gifts made by corporate foundations. The next two slides offer a 40-year arc of Giving USA in 5-year snapshots to illustrate the growing foundation giving totals, and they're shown in the light green that's just under the darker teal color in the bars in the context of other sources. This source has not declined in any of the 5-year periods between 1983 and 2022. And here we see how giving by foundations has grown as a percentage of total giving over the last 40 years, from 6% in the first 5-year period back in the 80s to 19% in the most recent 5-year period ending in 2022. So now that we've discussed sources of giving, here we shift to look at the recipient sectors of giving. When we look at where American generosity was directed, religion continues to receive the largest share of giving at 27%, but is decreasing. Human services received 14%, eclipsing education for the first time in 2022 at 13% and rounding out the top three. And here we see what changed among sectors. When adjusted for the high rates of inflation, giving declined, as shown in the dark green bars on the left, for all but 2 of the major recipient sectors. Among the 9 sectors, giving to foundations, primarily family foundations, and international affairs increased for 2022, even when adjusted for inflation. And here, when we add to foundations and international affairs, giving to education, to health, to arts, culture, and humanities over the past 2 years remains above their 2020 levels. So just as we looked at 5-year increments of giving by source over the arc of Giving USA, in this snapshot, we can see the changing percentages of overall giving by sector, beginning with giving to religious organizations, again, in the dark teal at the top, declining as a share of total giving in the 5-year period beginning in 1983, when it represented 58% of the total, down to 29% of the total during the last 5-year period from 2018 to 2022. The education subsector has received between 11% and 14% of total recipient contributions in the past 4 decades. And foundations have received between 5% and 12% of total contributions over the last 40 years. With this as context, we'll go to our third key takeaway.
So we've talked about the overall economic conditions and some of the changes in both sources of giving and recipients of giving by sector. What does this all mean for us as fundraisers? Despite a decline in overall total giving, strategies to cultivate, build, and retain donor relationships over the long term remain essential. We have seen our clients grow as they build upon the resilience and innovation they developed by necessity during the pandemic era. Nonprofits can continue to evolve by expanding online giving. Mobile devices are now responsible for the majority of all visits to nonprofit websites. And also by building the pipeline of donors and sustaining existing donors. And to this, donor communication and engagement is key. A survey of what Americans think about philanthropy found that individuals viewed nonprofits more positively than government or for-profit entities. And this has been the case for some time. With inflation trending down from the historic high in 2022, there is a potential, we think, for giving to trend up, making engagement with current and potential donors more important than ever.
As Jaron said, we've seen our clients evolve. So in brief, we encourage you to continue to evolve by expanding your digital presence, as research shows mobile devices are now responsible for the majority of visits to websites. Elevate the impact of your organization is making, and be sure online giving is easy to navigate. Double down on building relationships with your current donors. Invite them to help widen the circle of supporters who share in their commitment to the work and mission of your organizations. And with inflation trending down from the historic high in 2022, there's potential for giving to trend up, making engagement with current and potential donors more important than ever.
And indeed, when we talk about engaging with current donors, we wanted to introduce a concept that was first laid out in a book by Brian Crimmins, Nathan Chappell, and Michael Ashley called Radical Connections. Their book is called The Generosity Crisis. And they postulate that the need to build a new kind of connection with donors as we move into potentially a new era of philanthropy is essential. And what does radical connection mean? It means moving away from a relationship that is more of an association or affiliation with your organization, which is indicative of a preference, more surface level, where a donor will do as little as possible to check the box to be involved with your organization and could really sort of take it or leave it, to one where your donors really love your organization and will go out of their way to share what you do with the world and with their network, that supporting your organization is a part of their identity and they would sacrifice something in their lives to support your mission and your work. And really what this boils down to is building a feeling of not only does the donor know you as an organization, but that you as an organization know your donor. So in addition to the ways that we laid out to that your organization can continue to evolve, building on the resilience of the pandemic era, we really encourage you to think about, how am I building a radical connection with my donor base as part of this effort?
What we covered today, you heard about the economic factors behind and that were causative of, after 2 years of record generosity, giving is down in 2022. We shared with you a look at the shifts in giving by source to find that foundation giving, primarily family foundations, now makes up a larger percentage of overall giving, and that more than ever before, focused strategies to cultivate and build donor relationships are extremely important, as they've always been.
So
Jaron, I think we have one more poll.
We do. Before we open it up for your questions, we had one more poll question for you. And that is acknowledging that, this data represents data from 2022, and we're well into the second half of 2023, if you can believe it. And so we're curious, how are things faring at your organization in 2023? Has your organization been more successful in raising money than 2022? Are you still feeling the effects, perhaps, of this downturn and raising less money, or is it about the same? What are you seeing on the ground at your organization?
Just give one more second for people to get their answers, and I know it's still climbing up there.
We need some
Great.
theme music, some poll answering music.
Right.
Looks like we got a good majority.
All right. Okay. Well, so it looks like the plurality of you, about 43%, say that you're raising about the same at 2022. So maybe you are hanging in there and hoping for an uptick in the latter half of 2023, perhaps. 30% of you are raising more money. So it looks like a majority of you are faring pretty well, and perhaps are having a bit of an optimistic outlook for 2023 and perhaps into 2024. So that's really good to hear. So as we said before, please email us at info@alfordgroup.com. We have a special discount code if you'd like to purchase the full report on philanthropy for the year of 2022 for a 30% discount, in fact. So please do email us if you are interested.
And for those of you who are interested in learning more please scan the QR code that appears on your screen or visit our website at alford.com.
I've also just launched a poll for all of you who are on today. If you didn't get a chance to opt in when you initially registered for the webinar, feel free to fill that form out now, and we'll make sure that Alford Group gets your information so they can reach out to you.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
This has been so terrific, and we're so glad to have been with you today.
Let me just pull up
Thank
my
you all for
screen
your
again.
participation.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It looks like, Danny, we do have a couple of questions. I wasn't able to answer one as you were going through. Thank you, Michelle and Jaron. I appreciate the insights and the depth, kind of diving deep into the numbers. At the surface, they're kind of all looks the same year over year, right? But when you start to understand what that really means for your individual organization based on where you're at, it's very helpful. So thank you. Danny, do you want to go over those questions in the Q&A?
Absolutely. We had a couple questions come in about the second key takeaway that you were going through on how foundation giving is making up a larger percentage of overall giving. Where in those numbers that you were showing would donor advised funds come in?
It's a great question. Michelle, do you want me to take that?
Go ahead, Jaron.
Okay. So we figured this might be a question, and actually there's a whole chapter devoted to DAF, donor advised funds, in the Giving USA report. So again, those of you who might be interested in looking for yourself, we have that discount code for you. It's a little bit tricky, but I'll try to explain how DAFs are included. So in the giving by sources, so individuals versus foundations versus corporations, it's giving to DAFs are included in the source where the gift originally came from. So if it's an individual giving to their own personal DAF, it would be into individuals. If it's a corporation giving to a DAF, it would be in corporation. In terms of the recipients, the breakdown by recipient subsectors, the gifts to DAFs are counted in whatever category the sponsoring organization of that DAF would be in. So for example, national servicers like Fidelity Charitable or Schwab, those are included in the public society benefit subsector. DAFs that are housed at community foundations would be included in giving to foundations. And if it's a single issue DAF, then it would be included in that particular subsector. So for example, a donor advised fund at a university would be counted under giving to education. Giving USA uses the net value of gifts that are incoming to a DAF and outgoing grants when tabulating those recipient subsectors. So therefore, the gifts coming out of DAF are not included in the sources side. So the foundations, individuals, corporations does not include giving from DAFs, only giving to them. So hopefully that answers that question. Like I said, there's a whole chapter on them that goes into way more detail.
There we go. Forgot to unmute myself.
Other questions? Okay.
We did have, I'll plug this in real quick because I saw we had a question about the slide deck that Alford Group shared today. That will go out tomorrow in the email that you will receive as a registrant. You'll get a link to the webinar as well as the slide deck. So you'll be able to go back through, and I know there are a lot of graphs shared, so I'm sure you all want to dive back into those.
A lot of graphs with a lot of data points.
Yes.
Were there any, I know as I was looking through, it's hard to, well, you can't ignore inflation's effect on the economy, and we're all feeling it. Each American is feeling the effects of inflation throughout the year, but as you're going through the report, were there any trends or data points that surprised you or jumped out to you that you weren't expecting to see?
You know, I think one of the surprises, Danny, to your question is the point about the bequest giving from the smaller estates. You know, people think that you have to accumulate a lot of money to begin to think about bequest intentions. And this data clearly shows us with the, proliferation of vehicles for generosity, that even people with more modest means and more modest estates can be very intentional in setting up plans for their philanthropy. And so it really does underscore the importance of considering a program for planned giving, regardless of the size of your shop. It's a real opportunity.
Absolutely.
I think for me, one that was interesting was the fact that it's only a small change, but that giving from corporations actually grew slightly, even though, when adjusted for inflation, the value of that was still a decline. And I think that just shows that, corporations may be weathering this period of economic uncertainty and inflation a little bit differently, and actually some have benefited from it. So that was just something that was interesting. But at the same time, it's still a fairly small percentage of overall giving, and so I wouldn't suggest anyone changing their strategies based on that. But that jumped out at me as interesting.
Danny, if I can offer one more, it would also be the percentage of overall giving that are mega gifts. They get a lot of publicity. And, sometimes a big gift can make a lower level donor think, well, what is my gift going to do? And it just underscores the importance of, that individuals at all levels are truly the backbone of American generosity.
Absolutely. As you were saying, mega gifts, they're a real big game changer for those who receive them. It's
right.
It's the
right.
individual donors who are making the difference all across many different nonprofits in the work that they're doing.
And like Jaron spoke about, it's about building those radical connections with donors at all levels.
Absolutely. Brendan, is there anything that you wanted to add?
No, I think it's pretty well covered. I had similar reactions to the corporate giving. I would love to see that, maybe be a 10% increase would be nice, but slow and steady will work for now. But no, I appreciate the insights there, definitely.
Absolutely. Well, we've gone through all of the questions that I see. Let me double check everything. I want to make sure we're not missing anyone. Perfect. Well, if we don't have anything else, I want to make sure that I once again, give everybody the opportunity to take down Alford Group's information as well as QGive's information, and remind everyone that today's webinar does qualify for credits for continuing education for CFRE. So please take advantage of that if that applies to you. We don't want you to miss out on that opportunity. But thank you again, everyone, for taking time out of your day to join us. We so appreciate that you made this a priority in your day and you're ready to learn and improve in your practices within your own organizations. Thank you again to Jaron and Michelle for taking all the time you have to put all of this data together. I know those graphs couldn't have been a quick lift, so thank you so much for your time to go through all of the report and to share that with us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Well, with that, we'll wrap things up. Everyone, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will hopefully see you again on the next QGive webinar.